Watch. Winter 1900. A white tower on the edge of the ocean. Jagged stone cliffs. The wind tearing the sea apart. 3 men on a tiny island. Routine. Silence. Discipline. In the logbook, a single chilling entry. The storm is over. God is with us. On the shore, no smoke, no signal, no flag. Their boat still in place, the doors intact, but the men gone. The night before, sailors reported a strange light above the water. At dawn, the birds vanished. The sea turned to glass. No fish. A nearby ship called with its siren. No answer. Inside the station, everything was in perfect order, as if the men had stepped out for a moment and never returned. What did they see at the edge of the cliff? Who sent a distress signal from the void? And why did the light of the lighthouse go dark at that exact moment? 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis, in the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, rises a remote cluster of 7 rocky islands, known as the Flannan Isles. One of the most isolated places in all of Scotland. Bare basalt cliffs where little more than grass can grow, and where only seabirds make their nests. The islands were named after Saint Flannan, a 6th-century Irish missionary who is said to have built a small chapel here. Only the ruins remain, but the name endured. The largest island is Eilean Mor, Big Isle in Gaelic, yet its size is modest. Barely 400 meters long and 200 wide. A flat plateau about 40 meters above sea level, ringed with sheer cliffs of black basalt. The climate here is brutal, even by Scottish standards. In winter, the temperature rarely rises above freezing. The wind never rests, and storms can rage for weeks at a time. Summer brings little relief. Fog, rain, and a penetrating cold. The sun appears only rarely. Until the end of the 10th century, the islands were uninhabited. Occasionally, fishermen from Lewis would land here, collecting seabird eggs, but they never stayed long. The place was thought to be cursed. By the end of the Victorian era, maritime traffic off the Scottish coast had increased dramatically. Steamships and sailing vessels regularly made the passage between the Western Isles, mainland Scotland, and across to America. The Flannan Isles sat directly in their path. On long winter nights, or in a shroud of fog, captains often lost their bearings and struck the sharp rocks. Between 1870 and 1890, 6 ships wrecked in these waters. More than 100 lives were lost. The final blow came in January of 1890, when the steamer Glenmore smashed against the rocks of Eilean Mor in heavy fog. 43 passengers and crew died. The Northern Lighthouse Board, responsible for maritime safety around Scotland, made its decision. A lighthouse had to be built on Eilean Mor. It was no easy task. Every stone, every piece of equipment had to be shipped across and hoisted up sheer cliffs with cranes and winches. Construction began in 1896 and lasted 3 years. A feat of engineering against the elements. The chief engineer was David Allen Stevenson, a descendant of the famous Stevenson dynasty, builders of most of Scotland's lighthouses, including the legendary Bell Rock. The tower was built from local basalt quarried right there, 23 meters tall, its lamp visible up to 19 nautical miles away. Beside it, a sturdy stone keeper's house with thick walls strong enough to withstand the worst storms. Inside were a kitchen, a common room, 3 bedrooms, a storeroom, and a communication room. Because the island had no fresh water, a rain collection system was carved into the stone itself. Water from the roofs ran into an underground cistern. The light came from a first-order Fresnel lens, a massive construction of prisms and mirrors focusing the flame of a kerosene lamp into a piercing beam. The lens, weighing several tons, floated on a bath of mercury to rotate smoothly, sending its signature flashing signal across the sea. On the 12th of December, 1899, the lighthouse was lit for the first time. The first 3 keepers were Principal Keeper Thomas Dube, his assistant John MacLeod, and second assistant Donald McInnes. Their duty followed the standard rhythm of Scottish lighthouses. 6 weeks of service on the island, then a relief crew took over. The work was monotonous but demanded constant vigilance. The keepers maintained the flame, polished the lenses, wound the clockwork rotation, recorded meteorological data, and logged every event. Winter was the hardest. Short days, long nights, and storms that could isolate the men for weeks on end. Supply ships often could not reach them. To serve as a keeper meant enduring solitude, the endless horizon, and the roar of the sea. Each day began at 6 in the morning with the extinguishing of the night's light, followed by inspections, cleaning, and repairs. At noon, weather readings were taken. Temperature, pressure, wind speed, and direction, all meticulously logged. Then, preparation for the evening flame. Once the sun went down, one man kept vigil in the lantern room until dawn. Shifts rotated nightly. The men could read, write letters, or occupy themselves with small hobbies in their spare hours. From time to time, the lighthouse board would send them books. Yet contact with families was rare. Letters came only when the supply ship reached them, ideally every 2 weeks. In winter, months might go by without mail. The post demanded a particular kind of man. Disciplined, patient, able to endure silence, and close confinement with just 2 colleagues. Many applicants failed the test. The endless sky and sea, the monotony, the howl of gales, it could tear at the mind. Some men drowned themselves in alcohol, others sank into depression. Those who lasted were steady, unhurried souls who found calm in simple routines, observing birds, recording the weather, or reading scripture. And always a fragile balance of personalities was crucial. 3 men had to live shoulder to shoulder, day after day, without conflict. On a lonely island in the middle of a hostile sea, discord could turn deadly. The Lighthouse Board selected its crews with extreme care, not only for skill, but for psychological balance. Preference was always given to married men, middle-aged, steady, grounded. Out here, life itself was never safe. The ocean was the greatest danger. In winter storms, waves rose high enough to lash against the very lantern of the tower. Keepers had to step outside daily, tending machinery in driving wind and rain. A single misstep on slick rock could be fatal. Fire was another threat. Kerosene lamps, spare fuel stores, wooden fittings. One accident could consume the station. There was no help for miles. Illness struck with equal danger. The nearest doctor was 20 miles away. An attack of appendicitis or a sudden heart failure meant certain death if the sea was wild. And then there were the burdens no one liked to admit. Loneliness, tension, the slow corrosion of the mind. Even the strongest men sometimes broke. For a year after Eileen Moore's lighthouse came into service, duty passed without serious incident. Wrecks at sea vanished from the charts. The light had done its work, but the human element proved fragile. Many men begged for reassignment to mainland posts. The Atlantic was too harsh. By the end of 1900, however, a stable team of 6 had settled, and among them 3 men formed a working bond, stronger than most. Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, Donald MacArthur. In December of 1900, they took their watch on Eileen Moore. They could not know they were about to vanish into one of Scotland's defining mysteries. Thomas Marshall, 40 years old, principal keeper. For him, the sea and the light were not just a duty, they were his vocation. Raised on the Isle of Skye in a family of fishermen, he had known the moods of the ocean since boyhood. 2 decades of service brought him across 7 very different stations, from small coastal towers to the most remote rock lights. He was steady, disciplined, and deeply skilled at the delicate work of optics. Marshall could dismantle and rebuild a Fresnel lens blindfolded. He polished glass to a mirror's shine. He married late at 35 to Mary Campbell, a farmer's daughter from Lewis. They had 2 children, James, just 4 years old, and Anna, only 2. Mary kept house in Stornoway while her husband worked months at sea. For Marshall, the assignment to the Flannan Isles was the high point of a career, the newest, most advanced lighthouse in his district. A salary strong enough to provide for his family, a mark of trust and prestige that promised further advancement. His assistant, James Ducat, age 33, was a different kind of man. For him, service on the Flannans was not a calling. It was a job. He had grown up in Stronsay, in the Orkneys, son of a stonemason. He learned the trade, built homes, farm buildings. But the business was uncertain. Work came in spurts, then vanished. When he married Annie MacDonald at 25, the need for steady wages became urgent. 4 children soon followed. Mary, 10. John, 8. Then the little ones, David and Robert, just toddlers. Ducat took the post for security, not passion. He longed for home, complained in letters of loneliness, missed the sounds of his children's voices. Still he worked well, punctual, dutiful, though no lover of the long nights. His quiet, steady nature earned respect. He smoothed conflicts, never argued, never raised his voice. Marshall valued him for that calm. The third man was the youngest, Donald MacArthur, only 21. The newcomer. He had joined the service just 6 months before, and Eilean Moor was his first posting on the remote Rock Lights. He was born in Glasgow, son of a railway worker, but city life left him restless. After school, he worked as a clerk, yet he craved more. Adventure, open air, something greater than ledgers and ink. When he read the recruitment notice for lighthouse keepers, he seized the chance. Solitude, the wild sea, good pay, freedom. And he was unmarried, the perfect candidate for long postings away from the world. The seasoned men recognized in him an eager spirit, sometimes too eager. He asked endless questions, but he learned fast. Meteorology, navigation, mechanics. Marshall judged him promising. "Give him a year or 2, and he'll be one of the best," he once said. So in December, 3 very different men came together on the island. Marshall, the professional; Ducat, the family man; MacArthur, the dreamer. Experience, steadiness, and youth. It was a combination that might balance each other or ignite. Their days followed strict rhythm. At 6 in the morning, the keeper on night watch gave his report. Then the 3 ate breakfast together. Ducat usually cooked. MacArthur scrubbed dishes. Marshall planned the day's work. One went to polish the giant lens. Another examined the gears and clockworks. The third logged the weather. Meals were communal. They shared letters from home, dry news from the supply ship's bundle of papers. In the evenings they kept journals. Ducat wrote long letters to Annie. Marshall drafted reports. MacArthur noted the skies and the birds that roosted on the cliffs. When they found cheer, they played cards, or Ducat sounded his harmonica. Sundays were for prayer. By December, the storms had come in hard. Week into week, the seas cut them off. The 3 men stocked food, checked fuel, inspected spares and supplies. They braced themselves. The winter of 1900 was about to test them. The relief ship Hesperus was due at the end of December, bringing the winter's supplies. But every man knew the weather might delay her for weeks. Special care was given to the light. In these long, dark nights of winter, the lamp burned for 14 hours without pause. Any failure could mean disaster for ships steering blind across the Atlantic. Marshall, the principal keeper, drew up procedures for emergencies. What equipment to secure first in a gale, where to shelter when the wind threatened to tear the island apart. Ducat stocked materials to repair damage from storms, broken windows, leaking roofs, doors battered by spray. The men could expect no outside help. They had to mend every torn hinge, every shattered pane by their own hands. MacArthur studied distress signals, practicing procedures for communication. If disaster came, he would be the one forced to raise the call for help. None of them suspected December of 1900 would be their final month alive. The first half of December passed in rhythm. The fire was tended every night. Observations taken, the logbook filled with the dry details of duty. That log was more than ritual. It was an official record, the heartbeat of the station. Every entry recorded the light, the weather, the sea, the passing ships. On the 1st of December, Marshall's neat hand wrote, "Light lit at 5:30 in the evening. Visibility good, west wind, moderate. Barometer 760 millimeters, one steamer southbound." On the 2nd of December, fog from morning until noon, signal horn engaged, light lit at 5:25, wind southwest, fresh. Day after day, the notes continued with the mind-numbing monotony of order. A clockwork life measured in winds and barometers. Contact with the mainland came only through the supply ship, meant to arrive every 2 weeks. But storms often tore that schedule apart. The men wrote letters, aware they might sit unopened for weeks. Ducat wrote almost daily to his wife, filling pages with yearning for home and children. "My dearest Annie," he told her once, "today I saw whales passing south through the glass, off to warmer seas for the winter. How I envy them. Soon, I too will return home, to you and the children." Marshall wrote rarely, in a colder tone. Practical notes, reports about food, health, the garden waiting in Lewis. "Dear Mary," one letter ran, "the weather worsens but the light is sound. Payment for December will arrive as usual. Buy warm clothes for the children." MacArthur's letters were different again, written to parents and friends in Glasgow, filled with wonder, romantic descriptions of the raging sea. "Last night the waves topped the cliffs, breaking over the tower itself. An awesome sight. You feel like a grain of dust against the power of the elements." Each day 4 times they logged the weather, morning, noon, evening, midnight. They measured temperature, pressure, wind, humidity, the raw material of Scotland's forecasts sent later to Edinburgh by the board. By the 10th of December, the notes darkened. Noon, temperature 3 degrees, barometer 740 and falling. Wind southwest, strong, visibility poor, with rain squalls. The storm season had come. Seas surged higher. On the 11th of December, the log recorded, "Sea greatly disturbed. Waves 6 meters from the west. Heavy swell. Approach of ships impossible." Such words meant the men were sealed in and unseen. No supply runs, no letters gone or arriving, but this was no surprise. They had food, fuel, and the routines that filled each day. Maintenance was endless. Salt corroded metal. Winds rattled windows. The giant Fresnel lens, turned by its clockwork grind, needed constant care. That lens, weighing several tons, floated on a bath of mercury. It had to be kept pure, perfectly clean. Dirty mercury ruined the signal itself. On the 12th of December, burner 2 replaced, mercury trough cleaned. Bearings of the carriage oiled, all systems nominal. Marshall took pride in the tower. In a full year of operation, not once had the light failed to burn. MacArthur absorbed every detail eagerly. He longed to rise through the service, perhaps to sit one day in Marshall's place. Knowledge was the way. Master every hinge, every lamp, every gauge. The days and nights passed. Ships moved unseen through the mists, some caught in the beam. The men watched and recorded them. On the 13th of December, 9 in the morning, steamer northeast bound, likely mail packet from Glasgow to Stornoway. 2:30 in the afternoon, mast of sailing ship sighted southwest bound. By winter the traffic slowed. Many captains avoided the storm-choked waters west of Scotland, but the mail boats pressed on. Fishermen too. The job never ended. The 14th of December was the last ordinary day at the light of Eilean Moor. The entry read, "Light lit at 5:15. Wind west, very strong. Barometer 735. Sea high. Waves to 8 meters. The watch passed to MacArthur. The young keeper tended the lamp. Hour after hour, he checked the instruments, wrote down the numbers. At midnight, his final note. Wind continues strong. Visibility poor in rain squalls. Lamp working steady. In the morning, 15th of December, he handed the duty to Ducat and lay down to sleep. He never woke in his own bed again. The same day, Marshall took the logbook. The last words he ever wrote stand in dark ink. 15th December, storm over, sea calm. God is with us. A strange change in tone. Gone was the technical, the clipped language of duty. Instead, a prayer, a comfort, or a warning. Why that entry? Why those words? And most perplexing of all, the storm was not over. Reports from mainland stations confirm it raged on through the 15th.
Did Marshall mean a break in the gale, a deceptive pause in the storm's eye? Or had something else gripped him, forced him to the page with hasty, nervous script? Experts later agreed the handwriting was his, but rushed, uneven. From that day, no more pages followed. The journal fell silent. Against every rule and drill, the record stopped. And with it, 3 men vanished from history. No further entries in the log could mean only one thing. After the 15th of December, no man remained at Moor to write them. But where could 3 strong men vanish from a self-sufficient station, with food, fuel, tools, and every provision at hand? And why did no distress signal go out? The Lighthouse had red signal rockets that could be seen for 10 miles at sea. At worst, they could have lit a fire along the cliff, the smoke visible from neighboring isles. Yet not a single signal was reported. The light itself continued burning for a time, its clockwork lenses turning automatically, though no hand filled the lamps and no keeper polished the glass. The machine worked, soulless, tireless, even as the men were gone. In their last letters home, all 3 wrote of Christmas. Their shift was due to end on the 26th of December. They expected to be home in time for the feast. Duque promised gifts for the children of Stronsay. Marshall longed to spend the holiday with Mary and their little ones in Stornoway. MacArthur dreamed of returning to Glasgow, standing before his parents, proud, a seasoned keeper now. Soon I will be home, Ducat had written in his last letter. This turn has felt longer than most, but it is nearly over. Instead, 3 empty places sat at 3 family tables that Christmas. Food was set, fires lit, prayers whispered. But the men from Moor never came home. So what happened on that final night, between the 14th and 15th of December? That question has haunted Scotland more than a century. All that remained was a single sentence in the hand of Thomas Marshall.
The storm is over. God is with us. But according to weather stations on the west coast, the storm had not ended. In Stornoway, pressure was measured at 730 millimeters and still falling. Winds raged at force 9 on the Beaufort scale. At the very same time, Marshall wrote of calm seas. How could 2 records, separated by barely 30 miles of ocean, describe such different worlds? When meteorologist James Clark examined the data, his conclusion was stark. The differences in observed conditions within such a short range exceed what we consider normal meteorological variation. Other reports added to the riddle. The merchant captain Archibald Russell, sailing 50 miles to the south, noted in his log a heavy storm from the southwest, and, in the direction of the Flannan Isles, a strange patch of clear sky. In later years, testimonies were gathered from villagers on the Isle of Lewis. Some spoke of eerie, green-tinged light over the horizon that December night. One woman, Kate McIntosh, claimed she saw the glow shifting above the sea near midnight. Others said their livestock grew restless, animals bleating, dogs refusing to stir from their pens. Fishermen described the sea behaving wrong. Veteran sailor Murdo MacLeod swore the waves came cross-set, moving against the wind itself. Hugh Morrison watched waters surge in directions unknown. Modern science speaks of undersea currents, turbulence, hidden swells. Yet the exact cause of those anomalies has never been explained. And most troubling of all, there were no signals, no rockets, no smoke, No sirens, no fire on the cliff. Nothing from Eilean Mor. At first, some thought the light had simply burned out, but evidence soon showed the lens itself kept turning, obedient to its patient clockwork.
On the night of the 15th, Captain Alexander Holman of the mail steamer Clydesdale reported the light flashing correctly, a burst every 10 seconds, steady as ever. By dawn on the 16th, a fisherman named Donald McCrae, watching from Lewis, noted only darkness where the sweep of the beam should have carved the night. The following nights were the same. Ship after ship complained. The great Atlantic beacon was dark. The lamps had gone out, for good. The seabirds, too, had fled. Roderick McCrae, a keeper at Flannan Isles near a station, noted in his book, "A strange quiet, no seabirds crying in the dawn. Puffins, cormorants, gulls, the cliffs that should have teemed with them were emptied." Fishermen described the birds flying east in vast flocks, as though abandoning the islands. Old Gaelic lore calls such flight an omen, a harbinger of death. The sea itself grew alien. Nets drew up nothing. Fishermen told of water turned clear as glass, showing the seabed far below, but barren, empty of fish. Sometimes such clarity comes after quakes or deep-sea shifts, but no tremors were ever recorded. That night, in Stornoway, radio operator John MacDonald caught a strange signal on his headset. 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. It was the pattern of SOS, though in 1900 the signal was only just entering use. No lighthouse station, and certainly not Eilean Mor, even owned a transmitter. And yet the phantom call was heard. By then, 11 days had passed. The sea winds howled. The Hesperus approached, engine straining, her captain unaware of the mystery awaiting. A tower stood silent on the cliffs. Its light was dead, its doors shut, and the 3 men who kept them gone. No ship with working radio was near enough to explain the mysterious SOS signal heard on the Stornoway headset. Perhaps it was atmospheric interference, perhaps random noise. Yet the timing, so close to the lighthouse's silence, sent shivers through later investigators. Between the 15th and the 25th of December, meteorological charts showed curious anomalies over the Flannan Isles. Barometric pressure remained steady at 740 to 750 millimeters. Everywhere else along Scotland's coast, deep Atlantic cyclones dragged the pressure down to 700 or lower. Storm winds slammed the mainland, but around the Flannans there was a strange calm. Meteorologist James Clark later wrote, "It was as if a pocket of high pressure settled fixed over Eilean Mor, cut off from the region's weather. 10 days of such separation is beyond the norm for this part of the Atlantic." Against this uneasy backdrop, the relief ship Hesperus was scheduled to arrive at Eilean Mor on the 20th of December, but the sea itself refused. Storm after storm barred the way. The Hesperus was a 200-ton steam vessel built for lighthouse supply, with a reinforced hull and a winch to lift cargo against sheer cliffs. Captain Jim Harvey had served the western routes for 5 years. He was known as a master of treacherous waters. His log for the 20th of December was blunt. Departure impossible. Southwest wind, force 9. Harbor swell, 4 meters, awaiting improvement. In the hold sat food for a month, kegs of kerosene for the lamp, coal for the hearth, and the most precious cargo of all, Christmas letters from home. Finally, on Christmas Eve, conditions began to ease. By dawn of Christmas morning, December 25th, the Hesperus put out from Stornoway at 6:30. 8 men aboard under Captain Harvey. First mate John McDougall supervised the cargo. He had known the keepers personally. He often handed them letters from their families. At roughly 9 in the morning, the Flannan Isles showed on the horizon. Through binoculars, the white tower of the Eilean Mor lighthouse glimmered against the black cliffs. Every man on the bridge expected to see signs of life, smoke from the chimney, men hauling lines at the landing, a flag raised.
Instead, the island looked barren. No smoke, no flag, no movement. MacDougall narrowed his glass and frowned. No signs of preparation. They always ready the cart, the ropes, the pulleys before we arrive. By 10 o'clock, the Hesperus closed to within a mile. Still, nothing stirred. Harvey ordered the ship's horn to sound. The long, mournful note rolled across water, echoing back from the cliffs. Silence. No answering flag, no flare. The horn bellowed again, and again. Nothing. Next, the signal lamp flashed the call in Morse code. Eiley and Moore, respond. The beam blinked across the rocks for a full quarter hour. The keepers were trained. They had their own lamp, but no reply ever came. As a final desperate attempt, Harvey ordered the steam siren engaged. Harsh roars split the air, carrying for miles across the empty stone. 30 minutes they tried, no answer. The men searched the island through binoculars. The keeper's house stood intact, the roof unbroken, the glass whole, the door shut. Yet no smoke rose in the freezing air. The tower itself looked sound, its lantern unbroken, its panes clear. But the light was dark, though dusk was coming. The boat was there, tied fast at the jetty, just as it should be. Proof the men had not sailed away. The pulley gear, the lines, the handcart, all stowed neatly in the shed, nothing readied for cargo discharge. Captain Harvey wrote the moment into his log. 10:30, island appears uninhabited, no sign of keepers, prepare landing party. At 11, with no communication possible, Harvey gave the order. First Mate MacDougall was to land with 2 sailors and discover the truth. Landing on Alien Moor was always perilous. The coast was ringed with jagged teeth of stone. Only in steady seas could a boat dare approach. That morning, conditions just barely allowed it. At 11:30, the boat was lowered. It picked its way through the swells, weaving among shoals and hidden rocks. 20 minutes later, MacDougall's party reached the pier, their oars scraping stone at 10 minutes to noon. Through his glass, Captain Harvey watched from the deck of the Hesperus. At any moment, he expected to see 3 men stride from their quarters. He expected smiles, handshakes, explanations. Instead, the island remained silent. The lighthouse waited cold and still, and the men of Eiley and Moore did not come. The silence of the Flannan Lighthouse continues to echo through the ages.